Well, hello and good evening, and welcome back to episode 3 of the Hockey Writers Live. Mark Scheig with you. And as you can see, my co-host Josh Bell decided he didn't want to be a part of this week's episode. And he's got other things to do. He's on assignment, so it's just going to be me. But look, we brought our free agency team here for you tonight. Everybody, we got a 5-man crew here. Let's quickly introduce them to you. Let's start with Brandon Share-Cohen. Brandon, welcome.
Thanks. Great to be here, Mark.
Absolutely. Declan Schroeder, who's our Jets writer. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And Peter Baracchini, welcome. He's our Leafs writer.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Absolutely. And Jim Parsons, I tell you what, I got to say something real quick about Jim. If you read our NHL rumor articles out on the Hockey Writers, he is the one just chucking those out, just does a fantastic job for us. He also covers the Oilers for us. So Jim, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
And absolutely. And we got Devin Little as well, who's our Detroit writer. Devin, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, guy. I mean, we're only going to be here for an hour, and I'm not sure how much we can pack in here, but let's just jump right into this thing. So, Brandon, the biggest surprise of free agency so far to you is what?
Taylor Hall signing in Buffalo. I feel like everyone kind of expected him to either sign a long-term deal, for the money, or a short-term deal with a contender. And somehow he ended up missing the boat on both. Not that Buffalo doesn't have a chance to do something, but we've been saying that for how long now, right? So I feel like I think Taylor Hall might have surprised himself with the move. That's how surprising it was.
But why Buffalo, do you think? I think he turned down more money to be able to land in this spot. Maybe the appeal of playing with Jack Eichel, maybe that relationship with Ralph Kruger had a lot to do with it. I mean, that's quite a bet to go just the 1 year.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about Jack Eichel is obviously a great player. He's a premier player in this league. I don't know that long-term I'm saying even through the course of this season, that's a fit, the two of them together. I think they both play a very similar type of role as far as like puck retrieval. So I think putting Hall with Eric Stahl may even be the better option as the season goes on, but we'll see what happens there. I think there's also contenders that probably offered him similar money, maybe a similar term, and he would have turned it down and obviously gone to Buffalo. And we also know that he had a 1 or 2 year offer on the table, and he chose 1 year and said, hey, let's see how this goes. But also, I'm interested in making this a long-term commitment.
Declan, do you feel like that there's another surprise out there, or was Hall the biggest one for you too?
Hall was a big surprise for me, but just my impression of the first day of free agent frenzy last Friday, the biggest surprise to me was the number of really highly ranked players that remained on the board after day one. You had Pietrangelo still on the board after day one. You had Krug, and it was almost like we were here just at our free agency team, just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it just didn't on Friday. So I mean, I know teams are a little bit reticent to throw around too much money with a flat cap, but I was expecting a little bit more when your biggest deal of the day was Markstrom. I was expecting a little bit more on day one, but things have started to trickle in every day with signing. So I think we're clearing some people off the board, but just the number of, well, I guess what didn't happen was the biggest surprise to me, other than what actually happened on day one, at least.
Wasn't it? I think it was Cap Friendly that said that the average amount of cap space per team around the league was just a little over $6 million per team. That's well over 90% of the available cap league wide. Teams are bargain shopping. It's just really amazing to see how many good players are left, and there's going to come a decision. There's going to be some pressure for those players. They don't want to be left behind, so they might have to kind of temper their expectations a little bit just so that they have a seat at the table. So it'll be really interesting to see who decides to step up here.
Yeah, it's definitely not a player's market unless you're Alex Pietrangelo.
That's exactly right. So Peter, what do you think?
I mean, Brandon nailed it on the head with Taylor Hall. I mean, especially the contract, 1 year, $8 million, if that's sort of like a prove me deal. I would have thought he would have taken somewhere around 6 as opposed to $8 million, because that seems like a number that you would sign long term. But Tori Krug going to St. Louis, that kind of threw me off right then and there. I mean, as soon as he signed and that number was the news came out, then you knew Pietrangelo was already gone. But that kind of threw me for a major surprise, considering that they have not necessarily their own cap issues, but a lot of contracts that they needed to evaluate as well.
Could you imagine being Alex Pietrangelo for a second? When you see the news come down that Krug signed, depending on how much talk there was left, if he still wanted to end up in St. Louis, how would you feel? You won a cup there, you're the captain. Now all of a sudden you see in the news that Krug is signed, and it's like, oh, guess that's it. And so if I was him, that's a pretty tough way to end it here. But obviously he has a really good opportunity in Vegas. He's got well over 60 million reasons to be happy.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like a little bit slighted too if I were him. I mean, you have all these contracts negotiations going on beforehand, and it's sort of like the whole entire news story surrounding Pietrangelo is kind of like a circus, where it's like, okay, we're going to give you this, no signing bonuses whatsoever. It's either take this offer or go, kind of like Tori Krug. But it just kind of seemed like it wasn't going to go in the right direction for Pietrangelo at all. And again, Vegas landed the top free agent, so they mean business right now.
Yeah. So, Jim, anything to add to that, or is there a different surprise that stood out to you?
Well, I mean, the Taylor Hall stuff, I mean, I'll address a couple of things before I get into my pick, but the Taylor Hall stuff, I was surprised at first, but then the more I look at it, the less surprised I actually am. When you consider his history with Ralph Krueger and you consider that Jack Eichel's probably going to be on his line for at least a good portion of the season, it's only 1 year. It's a lot of money. There are a ton of teams that had contacted. I heard like as many as 25 teams reached out and 15 were sort of in it towards the end, but most of them couldn't offer more than 5 million. And a lot of them said, hey, I'm interested, but we got to move money first. So it was sort of a matter of like, how long can I wait, right? If I'm Taylor Hall, I got to pick something at some point, and he's still wide open to be able to go. I mean, he's got protection, but he can kind of pick his own spot. If Buffalo doesn't make the playoffs, if they don't turn out to be whatever, he's a good trade piece for them. He can kind of go where he needs to go at the deadline. So the more I look at it, the less it's a surprise to me. The Tori Krug stuff, I think, is a huge surprise too. And I think something's off there with the Pietrangelo, St. Louis, Las Vegas stuff. Just the way that they've all talked about this story. Pietrangelo saying, I thought I was in it with St. Louis all the way up until the end. He even said in an interview today that until I signed with Vegas, I didn't rule out St. Louis. So that means he was thinking about it after Tori Krug had signed, which is really strange to me. And then you've got Tori Krug, who says, I didn't even know St. Louis was on the radar. Like they just came out of nowhere and reached out to me and whatever. So St. Louis obviously thought something Pietrangelo didn't think. So I'm not really sure what all happened there, but so those two for sure were surprises to me. The biggest one to me was the goalie carousel. I mean, that was really strange. We talked about that repeatedly heading into this free agency. There were so many goaltenders and so many people available at potentially bargain prices. And I was just really shocked to see where everybody went. The Oilers were really high in on Jacob Markstrom, and they pitched like a 7-year deal to the guy. Didn't get him, but he wound up going to Calgary. I didn't see that one coming. I didn't see Braden Holtby going to Vancouver. I didn't see a lot of people going to certain places. And so when they all came off the board that quickly on day one, and you looked at that market and you said, holy moly, this is a huge variety of goaltenders. And now they're all gone. If you look at the market now, there's barely anybody left, right? I think Aaron Dell went yesterday to Toronto. He was the one guy that I might've looked at and said, maybe, right? I don't know what else you look at this point, which is why the Oilers kind of went to Smith. So the goalie carousel, I think, was a huge shocker for me.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about this later, especially when we talk about Edmonton. But the Mike Smith thing, I was really surprised to see them bring Smith back. But we'll ask your thoughts on that one there a little bit later.
Sure.
So, Devin, anything to add to this? Any surprises to you?
I think my biggest surprise was Taylor Hall, also Tori Krug. But just kind of racking my brain through it, I think Braden Holtby and just – not just that he went to Vancouver, but the amount. I thought for sure someone was gonna overpay him a bit. I'm comfortable with Braden Holtby at 4.3. I thought he'd get like 6. I thought he'd get a pretty similar contract to what Jacob Markstrom got.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to segue into our next part here, but it kind of goes into what my surprise was. The trade market, and you just see the discounted trades that some players were able to go for. I mean, being able to land Nate Schmidt for a 3rd-round pick. The New Jersey Devils got Ryan Murray for a 5th-round pick. I mean, just deeply, deeply discounted trades, like pennies on the dollar. I mean, with the cap crunch, you kind of expected that to happen, but I didn't realize that it was going to go down that far. I mean, I guess that's what you're paying for cap space these days. It's just really interesting to see the prices, just to be able to open up a little bit, especially from a Columbus Blue Jackets standpoint. So, Declan, I'm going to start with you on this, as we want to talk about the trade market. Any trades really surprise you, or just your overall thoughts on how it went at this point?
Well, one team's cap hell is another team's big opportunity to improve their team for little money, and I think that's just another COVID casualty is the salary cap, and it's just sort of these discount trades are sort of born out of necessity. So the Jets, for example, were one big beneficiary of that. They were able to wrangle Paul Stastny, who was so good between Nikolai Ehlers and Patrick Laine back in 2018. They were able to wrangle him for just Carl Dahlstrom, who was a waiver wire pickup and a 4th round pick. So it's inevitable that this is going to have to happen when you're a team like Vegas that's trying to either clear cap or is so close to the cap ceiling that you really have to depart with some pieces if you want to add some new ones. So just chalk it up to COVID, just like everything else in 2020.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more trades coming. Peter, I mean, your team, the Leafs, had a couple that went down early on with Kasperi Kapanen, then Andreas Johnson ended up going. Just your overall thoughts on the trade market that you've seen.
Well, yeah, I mean, the trade market that we saw in, February when the trade deadline happened is completely different from what we're seeing right now. I mean, it's again, like Declan kind of alluded to, it's what the market is right now. And from Toronto's perspective, getting a 1st round pick in exchange for Kasperi Kapanen, who didn't have all that great of a season, in my view, was kind of like I don't know if it set the standard for what the market would be like, because that was one of the first moves that happened after they left the playoffs. So they get a 1st round pick and they get a decent prospect in Hollander was great, but that kind of shifted with Andreas Johnson and his cap trying to get less for what they got with Joey Anderson right now. So you could kind of see the difference of the direction of where they were going, but yeah, it's really crazy right now.
Absolutely. Jim, do you expect any more trades to come down the line here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see a ton. I don't know if it's going to happen right away, but I get the sense that a lot of GMs, and there's still some free agents, and there's still a lot of movement that needs to happen with the cap, and a lot of teams, some that aren't so close to it and haven't made moves, and then some like Columbus who have a ton of space and haven't done anything really. So I expect some things to happen, but I would imagine the GMs are going to come back to this market in a week or two and kind of look at it and go, okay, well, who didn't go anywhere? What happened? Where are these teams stuck? Where can I take advantage? And I think we're going to see a little downtrend, and then we're going to see another uptick again. And I can imagine the business will go from signing people to trading people.
Mm-hmm. And just, from a Columbus standpoint here, Jarmo Kekalainen's on record. When he talked to us the other day, he said the things that we're going to look for are the opportunities that come because of the cap crunch. So he wasn't implying free agency here. He was implying the trade market, and there are going to be some very interesting teams. The Tampa Bay Lightning for one, the Dallas Stars is another, the Arizona Coyotes, even though they've had all kinds of crazy things happen to them, they're near the cap. So there's going to be some interesting opportunities that teams are going to look for. And I believe it's still a developing trade market. I mean, depending on what Tampa does, depending on what other teams do, there may be players available that we're not thinking about yet. And that's what we're going to be watching for here. So Devin, your team is one that has a ton of cap space with Detroit. I just wonder your thoughts on the trade market, and do you feel like Detroit can be a major player here, maybe getting a bunch of future assets out of trying to help teams out of cap hell?
Yes, and I think that's Steve Yzerman's plan here. He's kind of already gotten a head start with the Mark Stahl trade a week ago. Got the 2nd round pick for him. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's also one of those general managers that's kind of waiting out his counterparts and seeing how the landscape kind of takes shape. Obviously, teams are going to try to figure out what they can do, and as you noted, Detroit has a lot of space. At some point, somebody's going to come knocking, and whether it's they bring on somebody just to have a dead contract, or they bring on somebody to take a spot, just for a year, kind of like what Mark Stahl looks like he's going to do. I think that is they are poised to make one, maybe even two more Mark Stahl-esque ads.
It'd be really interesting to see what they decide to do. I mean, if there's anybody that is considered to be some of the smartest GMs out there, or near the top of that list, has to be Steve Yzerman. It'd be really curious to see where he goes with that. So Brandon, going back to the Montreal Canadiens for a second here, in trades, they had a trade that saw Max Domi go for Josh Anderson. So what did you make of that? And then what do you make of the overall trade market?
So for Montreal, I mean, they've been probably like one of the busiest teams you'll see in an offseason when most teams are kind of reluctant to make the first move. Montreal really didn't wait. They traded for Jake Allen. They traded for Joel Edmondson. They traded for Josh Anderson. The Anderson trade in itself, I wasn't crazy about, but I also understand if they have a vision in their mind, I guess you just go for it. The extension I'm not as crazy about, and I think, you can speak to it as well, but obviously he's a very good player when healthy, but that concern of his health is obviously there. And then you're talking about, was it a 7-year deal? That's a long commitment for a guy who you don't know if he's going to be the same player he was pre-trade, pre-injury. Go ahead if you want to.
Yeah, I'm going to speak up on Josh Anderson for the Habs fans that are watching. You're getting a really good player. The obvious question here is going to be the health, and he would have come back in the second round of the playoffs had the Blue Jackets managed to advance. He's been cleared to play. He doesn't anticipate the shoulder being an issue, but the obvious test is going to be the physical play, because he's a fast skater and he loves to play physical. So he's going to have to make sure they test out that shoulder a couple times just to make sure he's able to do that. I know there are many of you that are wondering about the term and the dollars, and totally get that, but understand that he has actually fought Zdeno Chara willingly on multiple occasions. Okay. So if he's willing to do that, he's going to become a fan favorite in a hurry, because there are very few players in the National Hockey League that are like Josh Anderson. He's very much like a Tom Wilson, but he just doesn't go as close to the edge as Wilson does. But that's the kind of game they play, because he can be on your penalty kill. He can be an offensive threat at both ends of the ice, on the kill and at 5-on-5. 27 goals a couple of years ago. Last year, I know it's just the one goal, and I know a lot of people worried about it, but if he gets back to normal, look out. That's actually going to be a really good signing for the Montreal Canadiens, moving forward here, is just the way that he plays the game. It's going to give a jolt of energy to the team, especially when they need a lift, because he's that kind of player. He's kind of like the Energizer Bunny. He's just going to be so good. He's going to get the crowd really going up. I really like the move. He loved it in Columbus. It'll be really interesting to see, if he's able to adapt and to, kind of go from there. So
I have a question for you, Mark, about that.
Yep.
Had you heard the story coming out of Columbus that Elliot Friedman was talking about yesterday or today, that Anderson had said to Columbus, I either want 1 year, which will walk me into unrestricted free agency, or 7 or 8, I guess was their max term. And they weren't comfortable with either. And that's why the trade took place. And he said the same thing, I guess, to Montreal, which is why they chose the 7 years.
Yeah.
Had you heard that coming out of Columbus?
Yeah, we knew he wanted a long-term deal. He came out and said, I want to be in Columbus. I want a long-term deal, but given that Seth Jones is going to be up in 2 years and Zach Werenski is going to need another contract in 2 years, and now Domi will need another contract in 2 years. 2 years is going to be a big thing, and I'm just not sure that they are able to stomach going out to 6 or 7 years at a bigger number. You saw what he signed for in Montreal. I think the report that I saw out of the Athletics said that he turned down 7 years for $35 million. So they tried to get him, but he really stuck to his guns. Because he really believes in who he is, and he would have taken the 1 year had Columbus wanted to do that, but they weren't interested. So
yeah, I think for a guy like Anderson, I mean, obviously we said the health is a concern. So for him, it's hey, if you want to prove a deal, I'll do a prove it deal. But if you're not going to give me the 1 year to do it, I don't want a 2 year bridge. I don't want 3. I want to either do a 1 year deal or I want the long term. Yeah. And I mean, we know that there was a lot of teams around the league that were interested in in making a trade for him, and then I'd imagine subsequently signing him, whether it's to a 1 year or a 7 year term. So for Montreal, I'm never one to say, someone was going to pay him, so you should have done it, because in my mind, if someone got a bad contract, let someone else pay it, that's fine with me. But if Montreal has this vision, and obviously Mark Bergevin has been doing this for a while in Montreal, where he's kind of teetering the line between making some good moves and making moves and that don't quite get the Canadians over the hump. So you think, well, is this guy on the cutting block? Is he going to be there for longer? So for him, it's really a matter of, I've got to keep going all in and pushing my chips to the table as much as I can. We've seen him sit on a lot of cap space in recent years. So basically this signing, the Edmonton signing, the signing for Jake Allen, which just came out today, the 2-year extension, this is him saying, hey, we're making moves and we're actually going to spend our cap space. It's not going to go into Molson's pocket this year. So I think in general, the trade market has been very much either bizarre, where you're getting a first-round pick for a guy like Kapanen, or you're getting a Max Domi and a third for Anderson, who's unproven, or you're getting a third-round pick 2 years from now for Nate Schmidt, right? Like it's a very unpredictable market. I think a lot of teams are doing okay, we're going to look at trade market. We're going to see if we have a player that we can get for sure. Okay, we couldn't get that guy. We're going to look at free agency. Okay, the first wave's gone. Let's look back at trades. It's going to go back and forth until teams kind of settle in. I think the cap space really comes into play there, where teams are afraid. It's not so much the cap space as it is, the flat cap and the potential for revenue as well. I'd imagine a lot of teams that have their own internal salary caps can't go all the way and go to the limit anyway. And now they're afraid of actual revenue and what they're going to make long term. So we have no idea what's happening with COVID, right? We have no clue. So teams are operating with billions of dollars. They can't just make, huge moves.
The last thing I'll say about Anderson for now is there were multiple teams interested in him. I know Boston was in on him. And I think Calgary was too. And I think the really interesting part about it was had it been Calgary, I think there really would have been some fireworks. Like there could have been a bigger trade involved, possibly seeing a Johnny Gaudreau come to Columbus with Anderson and maybe one of the goalies, before they landed on Jacob Markstrom. I knew they were talking about the goalie for a while, with one of either Jonas Korpisalo or Elvis Merzlikins. So it would have been really interesting to see where that ended up. But it's done, it's over with. So we'll see if Montreal, makes the best of the situation now. So Peter, let's kind of segue here to our next question. I'm going to ask you to put your general manager hat on for a second. There's a ton of free agents that are still available, as we alluded to earlier. So if you had the opportunity to sign one player that's currently available right now, make your case. Who would you pick and why?
A lot of great names right now, but I think for me at the top of my list, Michael Granlund. He kind of had a down year with the Nashville Predators, but you can't deny the fact that he's still a great two-way centerman who could be a threat in all three zones and in all situations. So if I'm not a great GM, I barely got by an NHL EA Sports, but if I were to look at somebody and try and get kind of like maybe a 3-year, maybe around maybe 2-3 million, again, try and not necessarily lowball, but the cap situation, I think you could try and get him in that range depending on how long he wants to sign for. And I assume he wants to go to a contending team right now because he's been in the league long enough. He wants to try and get his shots. So I think he's at the top of my list right now.
Yeah, and because I know some Blue Jackets fans are watching this, if they can land Granlund at the right number, that's a perfect fit because he can also play on the wing, and they need somebody, especially to the left of Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I think that I know Hoffman's out there, I know Dadonoff's out there, but if I'm the Blue Jackets and I know that I can get Dubois signed without the threat of an offer sheet, I would take a good hard look at Mikael Granlund and don't underestimate the Mikko Koivu signing, as I really think that there could be a little bit of a connection, maybe possibly bringing him into Columbus too. So it's definitely a strong possibility. So Jim, who do you got? Who would you be taking right now if you were the GM?
Well, I know who I'd be watching. I don't know who I'd be taking necessarily. I'd be having my eyes on Anthony Duclair. Because here's a guy who is going into free agency in the most unique of situations. He walked away from Ottawa in the arbitration case. He's representing himself. Like, he doesn't have an agent at this point. So here's a guy who walked in, I can only assume, walked into free agency, said, I'm worth this. And there was no buyers, nobody, no takers, no nothing. Like he just couldn't, he didn't land a gig right out of it. So I'm sure he's stuck on his is what I think I'm probably worth. And what's probably going to happen is that no team's going to give him what he thinks he's probably worth. So here's a guy that you might want to watch because he's a good player. You know, he's had up and down and streaky moments, but he played really well in Ottawa last year. And if it takes a long time to get him signed, he's going to have something to prove. He's going to have a major chip on his shoulder. He's probably only going to get a 1-year deal. He's going to be upset about it. He's going to come out of the gates probably on fire. He's a guy that you can play in a lot of situations. He can play deep in your roster. He can play maybe on the top 2 line if you're really stuck. And he's going to be, I think he's going to be cheap. I know that he thinks he's going to want a certain amount of money. I just don't think he's going to get it. So if I'm a GM, I'm watching that really closely and I'm looking, okay, how long before he gets impatient? Because he's on his own, right? Like this is probably the first time he's ever done anything like this. And what do you do when it comes to the point where you're so pressured into making a decision that you finally cave, right? And here's a guy who probably will. So that's a guy who I keep my eyes on because he can really produce. I mean, this guy can get you 20, 30 goals if he's in the right situation.
Yeah, but now the counterpoint, how many chips has he had on his shoulder previously and how many teams has he been through? You just kind of wonder with a player like that, how many more chances does he have? And not often, you called it out, you know, he's on his own and trying to negotiate for himself. He may only have just the one chance left. I mean, been to a couple of different teams and just hasn't been able to stick at all. We'll definitely see where that goes.
Yeah, and I think the deal there is that wherever he signs, it won't be for long term. So nobody's going to be stuck with him for a long time. So they're going to get a 1-year discounted deal out of this.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Devin, what do you think? Who would you take if you were the GM and had a chance to sign someone?
So, as you previously mentioned, Dadonov and Hoffman, I think those are both very, very much well worth consideration. They both can do some great things on the wings, especially if they have good centers alongside of them. But I'm looking at a guy like Connor Sheary, who has excelled alongside Sidney Crosby. So if you're looking for a depth piece that, you know, can complement a top player, you could probably get Connor Sheary at a pretty decent price too. Obviously, you're not bringing him in to, you know, really tilt the scales in your favor, but he can kind of complete your lineup and, you know, really pull it together. Yeah, that's a guy I'm looking at.
And Brandon, before we get into I'll ask you a quick question here. Do you think Zdeno Chara comes back with the Bruins, or do you think he's done? Do you think he still plays? Do you have a sense?
My sense is he goes back to Boston. I think obviously he's kind of taking his time. He's hearing offers from other teams. I think it's really just him letting the dust settle. We saw it with Joe Thornton a few years ago as well with San Jose. Basically, he had a chance to take, like, was like a 1-year, $8 million deal, which I think he did end up taking. Or he was like, hey, if you can get a certain player in here, you know, you need the cap space, I'll take less to maybe help out. Maybe that's kind of a thing we're seeing behind closed doors. I know Boston's usually pretty tight-lipped about, you know, we hear a lot of things coming out of Boston, but it's not often that it's true. And that's not just the Bruins, but we've also seen that with like the Boston Celtics as well, the New England Patriots. Like the trade rumors around these teams don't really come out as accurate once everything's settled. So I think for Chara, you know, kind of sitting back, he's actually, I mean, he's obviously earned the opportunity to hear offers as well. He's been with the Bruins since 2006. He's been, you know, gold standard for captains around the league, whether you love him or you hate him. I think anyone that knows him, what he is off the ice and the person he is to the players around him, the guy is very much a leader. So I think he's just taking his time and seeing how things go for the Bruins. And I mean, maybe he ends up elsewhere. Maybe he ends up retiring. But my gut says he ends up going back to Boston.
And now if you were the general manager, who out there would you be looking to take in?
I guess it depends on the situation. I know a lot of people, specifically in Boston, are looking at Dadonov. They're looking at Hoffman because it's a legitimate scoring touch or a legitimate, you know, complete winger that could help out. I think one player that's really, really flying under a lot of people's radars is Andreas Ethanosia. He's 26 years old. He's big. He's skilled. We know he can score. I was shocked that Edmonton didn't tender him. It's crazy to me. You know, giving him the qualifying offer would have been a no-brainer if I was the GM in Edmonton, but I'm not. So I guess it's not a no-brainer.
I actually wasn't surprised considering, you know, he went to, Jim can obviously speak to this, you know, covering the Oilers, but That seemed like a really high number, and it seemed like it didn't work out from the time that he ended up getting there. I mean, the theory was right to try to find that player that can stick with McDavid, but Jim, what happened with Ethanosia?
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys are kind of right on both things. He came over. Holland had history with him in Detroit. Brought him in thinking that he could maybe find some chemistry quickly, and then everything went on pause. So he didn't really produce like he should have, and then he didn't get a chance to produce like he should have. And then his qualifying offer at $3 million was just way too much for the Oilers. They just weren't prepared to go there, especially being as tight to the cap as they were going into free agency. So they did try to make an offer actually to him and Matt Benning, who both left. They tried to get a deal done with him, but just those guys just wanted to test free agency. Now, I don't know. I haven't heard this, and I think the Oilers are done. But I don't know that Andreas Ethanosia is completely out of the realm of possibility at Edmonton. Mm-hmm. If he decides that he can't get what he wants to get in free agency, he could come back. I mean, you got a really good opportunity there with two really good centers. So you could have a chance to do something. But it's hard to say that that's going to happen because there's got to be a theory there that, when you leave a team and you test the waters and you try somewhere else, it's probably pretty hard to go back knowing that you're going to take less than you turned down. So I don't know that it's going to happen, and I don't know the Oilers have room for it, but I just think the $3 million was just way too much, and they couldn't afford it, and they would have liked to keep him. They just couldn't do it.
The way I see it, though, is if a guy who's 26, who has the proven track record that he did, if he can get, I don't know, 4-year deal, you give him $12 million, I think most people would say that's a steal. I know Edmonton has a very specific situation with the cap, and they're trying to figure things out elsewhere in the roster. I also know that, he didn't fit with them as far as like 13 games, including playoffs, whatever, like 4 months apart. I understand where there could be some hesitation, but like you said, it's really hard to give him a fair shake when everything kind of played out like it did. I think in a perfect world, it goes a lot differently for Edmonton and for Ethanosia.
Yeah, and I think they're too looking at the fact that he had one 30-goal season and not a bunch of 30-goal seasons, right? If he had more and there was more consistency in his game, like he had a really good – when you put 30 goals on your resume, people are going to look, right? Like it's just the way that it is, but he has not done that more than once. And so there's always going to be a little bit of a question mark about that. So I'm guessing that there was just too much uncertainty, and the Oilers were just like, look, we don't know. I mean, it sucked too, because you don't want to give up 2 second-round picks and then get nothing for it, right? Like they got 9 games and like 4 points out of 2 second-round picks. Like it's just not what you want to do. But
the Bruins have no experience giving up 2 second-round picks and getting nothing in return. So no, I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting names left. Certain players that I wouldn't have expected to get the deals they got. Tyler Toffoli, I thought probably could have got more. Taylor Hall, we expected more years or a better team, a team that maybe had more of an established contention window. Pietrangelo, I think that's look, I'm probably Pietrangelo's biggest fan, and I would have loved to have seen him on, a number of teams. That contract is definitely something we're going to talk about 5 years from now, 6 years from now, 4 years from now, who knows? But that's just the cost of winning in this league, right? Sometimes you have to make those big deals when your window. The Golden Knights their windows now, right? It's now and it's in the future, but if they have such a big window now, you make that deal. And then you have people like Ethanosia, Hoffman, Dadonov, Chara, like we said. Like there's a lot of really good players, and that's just 4 or 5. There's a lot of really good players that are left on the market who, I mean, I'm curious, like it's like Jim said about Declan. What kind of deal are they going to get? Is it a 1-2 year deal? Is it minimal money? Is it going to be a huge deal like we saw with Pietrangelo? Or I don't know. We have no idea what's going to happen yet, but it's going
to be a game of who can outweigh who.
Yeah.
Who waits longer, right? That's got to be how it goes.
And we're nowhere near the end. Like we're less than 1 week in, and a lot of dominoes have already fallen, and we're going to see what happens from here.
And just here, we're a little bit past 8:30 Eastern. Just wanted to say, if you're just joining us, welcome. This is the Hockey Writers Live. This is episode number 3. I am your host, Mark Scheig, and I have our free agency team from the Hockey Writers on board. Declan and Peter and Devin and Brandon and Jim are kind enough to join us tonight. And we're just going through, and we're going to go to Declan now, and just been asking everybody thus far, if you were the GM and you had an opportunity to sign one player, who would you target?
Well, actually, just before we get into that, a little aside is that I think it's funny that we've mentioned here 2 out of only 3 players left in the NHL that were drafted in the 90s with Thornton and Chara. So that just really speaks to the longevity of those players. But I would agree with Peter from earlier, is that I'm taking a long look at Mikael Granlund. I know 30 points with the Predators in 73 games this season is nothing to write home about. But you take a look at his potential and what he did with the Wild. He had 69 points in the season, 67 points in the season, and you think, well, maybe he's not going to provide you that. But there's no denying his skill. There's no denying that he plays the game at a breakneck speed, and there's no denying that he could be a complement to a lot of players around the league, not just on the Winnipeg Jets, but he could pretty much complement just about any team. So that's a guy I'd be looking at for, if I could get him affordably on a 2 or 3 year deal. But another player that, before everyone's eyes roll right out of their heads, I'm going to preface that, is Alex Galchenyuk. I know you said earlier with Ethanosia or with Duclair, how many more chances does a player get? And I think for a team like the Jets, they might be able to get something out of Galchenyuk, as the problem with him has never been on the ice. It always seemed to be in between the head or in between the ears.
Yep.
And with a coach like Maurice, who's well known with being able to work with players pretty respectfully through their sort of mind issues, so to speak. If you can get him affordably on a 1 year or 2 year sort of prove yourself contract, I think that could have the potential to pay off pretty handsomely. So I know he was good in Montreal, but he didn't become what they thought he would be. And I know he has struggled and bounced around, but that's somebody that's like a low risk, high reward sort of situation.
Mm-hmm. And there's two names that I'll just throw out there to kind of wrap this conversation up that I think that if once there's enough pressure and they're willing to take a little bit less money, I think you definitely jump on. I think the first one is Eric Holla. And I think the other one too, and I'm surprised that this didn't not getting a little bit more attention, is Travis Hammonic. I think he's definitely could help someone's defense for
Everybody
sure.
thought that he was going to go to the Jets, just kind of based on default. But so far, the reports are that they haven't reached out to him, and now they're basically at the cap ceiling where to make any sort of additions, they have to move salary out first or hit the trade market. So I was very surprised that Hammock's not a Jet already. Yeah. And I'm surprised they haven't talked to him at all.
Sorry, Declan. This might not be fair, but do you think Hammonic's situation has anything to do with him excluding himself from the bubble? Him not wanting to come back for the play-ins. Do you think there's any concern from a GM that if he doesn't choose to participate in whatever might be going on this next season, that could be a concern?
I think that's a possibility, but
he's a good defenseman. I'm amazed that he hasn't been on anybody's radar yet.
Yeah, with so much uncertainty, I guess the more risk-averse GMs would not want to add another wrinkle of uncertainty in case there is a Canadian bubble or divisional bubbles that, he might not be willing to come to one of those. And when you have so much in the air already, you don't want to be spending, X number of millions of dollars on a guy that might say, you know what, no, I'm not, I'm taking my stick and I'm going home, so to speak. So I think that could be a possibility that I hadn't thought of, but that's a good point.
I think when you're looking at a league like the NHL, where it's such an old school mindset for a lot of things, I think that could be something. I hope it's not. I really do. But Declan said, the risk-averse GMs may not want to add something to it. And we've seen that, time and time again, where certain issues that may be perceived, whether they're valid or not, I think that they'll try and avoid them if they can get something comparable. I think, Mark, when you said there's two players you want to throw out there, Eric Holla and Travis Hammock were the two players that right away I was thinking, well, if it's not them, then I'm very curious as to who it is, because those are two names that I'm shocked are still on, at least we haven't really heard much about them at the very least. And I'm shocked that you expect at this point, this is the second wave of players, they'd be right up there with guys like Dadonov, Hoffman, like they should be in the discussion, but we're also still under a week out from the first day of free agency. So it's not too shocking. In the past, we've had teams and players have the opportunity to talk early. We didn't really get that period this year because of the circumstances. So the kind of flatness around that doesn't surprise me. I will say this, we didn't talk about it much, but what does surprise me is the lack of rights for players being moved. We knew there's going to be a lot of turnover, and players, we thought maybe Taylor Hall would have his rights traded, and just didn't happen.
Yeah, we saw that happen with Joel Edmondson, right?
Yeah.
I would have thought that would have been much more of a thing, but maybe teams didn't want to give up an asset. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I think it's a perfect segue actually to, I think the best part of our show tonight. We're going to go to each of you because I know, on top of you all being part of our free agency team, you all cover a specific teams or sometimes multiple teams, and this would be a great way to ask an interesting question about each of those teams so that fans kind of get a sense of what you might think of a particular situation. And Brandon, I'll start with you with Montreal. We talked about Anderson Domi earlier. We talked about the Brandon Gallagher extension, Tyler Toffoli, Joel Edmondson. The one guy we haven't talked about yet is Jake Allen. And I'll tell you what, I think that is a very shrewd move, because if you can rest Carey Price, you're on to something. And they can now start Allen, being a former starter himself, won a Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues behind Jordan Binnington. That's a very shrewd move. I just wonder, what are your thoughts on Montreal's offseason overall, and specifically Jake Allen now, and he signed an extension as well?
So Carey Price's health has always been a concern, even before this monster extension that he signed. We know he's one of the best goalies in the world. We know this. The issue is workhorse goalies don't get it done anymore because it's such a different game. We've seen every Stanley Cup winner since 2010. I think it would have been Jonathan Quick, would have been the only exception to the rule. Every team has a goalie playing 58 games or less that's won the Stanley Cup, and I think even competed in the finals. So you're talking about a very, very, 10 years now, we've seen this trend. So for Montreal, getting a player like Jake Allen, like you mentioned, he's a former starter himself. He's also played in Montreal before. He played for the Montreal Juniors briefly back in the QMJHL. He knows the city. He knows the area, I'd imagine, very well. He also gets, former teammate Joel Edmondson to maybe come over, and the two of them get to kind of gel together, and they don't have to really, take on the storm that is Montreal by itself. A guy like Allen was a really smart move for Montreal. They had the cap space to spend, and they addressed the situation where, hey, we've had goalies in the past that have, kind of done their job, but we haven't really relied on them to take, 30 games, 35 games from Carey Price in the past. Jake Allen could do it. And if Price does happen to go down with injury, Jake Allen's also more than suitable enough to fill in there. And they've got other goaltenders who can play backup very nicely if Allen ends up taking the reins for a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever an injury may be. But I mean, the primary thing is just taking a lot of the pressure off of Carey Price.
Absolutely. Declan, we're going to go over to you now. We're going to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. And I don't know about anybody else on this panel, but I thought somebody would be traded by now. It could have been in the form of Patrick Laine. It could have been in the form of Jack Roslovich. It could have been in the form of Nikolai Ehlers. I read a bunch of different things and a bunch of different possibilities that just seem like that they've been rumors for now. So I ask you, the one who covers the Jets for us, do you get the sense that a move is actually coming?
I do, but not for Patrick Laine. I think that the ship for trading Patrick Laine has sailed a little bit since the acquisition of Paul Stastny, because you finally get the second line center you needed after years of debate about who should play the role. You finally get that second line center to play with Laine. Now it makes no sense to ship Laine out of town, especially when you take a look at how quickly Stastny and Laine and Ehlers all gelled back in 2018. So I think the Jets are looking to sort of recapture that lightning in a bottle and hope that the chemistry can be rekindled between them. So I don't think Patrick Laine is going anywhere. I don't think Ehlers is going together. I think that line of three is going to be a thing, at least for the start of the season, no doubt. But I do see a move imminent with Jack Roslovic. I do see him being shipped out here before any season begins. He's had his shots on the Jets top six, and he hasn't shown nearly enough to justify moving somebody out of the top six to put him in there. He's not really suited for the third or fourth line. So I do think Roslovic's going to be shipped out this offseason for another defenseman, because with all the cap space the Jets had, nearly 14 million to start, then 11 million after signing Dylan DeMello, they still haven't truly addressed their defensive issues, and they still need another top 4D. So I do see Roslovic shipped out probably alongside anyone. Taking Roslovic's probably going to have to take Matthew Perreault. He's got an albatross of a contract that's a boat anchor around the Jets' neck. So one target was Nate Schmidt, of course, but he ended up going to the Canucks. And so I think your focus shifts now to Mackenzie Weegar in Florida, which has been reported on as they're talking there. So I think, Rossi will be moved out, but Ehlers and Laine will be staying put for now.
And you kind of took my other question. I was going to ask you about the defense and what they might try to target. And you mentioned Weegar. I think it's a really good call on your part. Is there anybody else that you could see them targeting at this point?
Other than Hammonic, which I'm surprised didn't happen or hasn't been talked about, not particularly, but I do want to add that the addition of Derek Forbort is one that could pay off really handsomely for the Jets. I know it was met with the signing was met with some derision by Jets fans who, they wanted a bigger name for a defensive signing. There was a lot of chatter about making a play for Pietrangelo, but why would you want to live in Winnipeg if you could live in Las Vegas? But I digress about that. But the Derek Forbort signing, I think, has the potential to be a real steal at 1 year, $1 million. He has top four experience, albeit with Drew Doughty, so that's a pretty strong partner to play with. But the Jets D line is also pretty slight. He brings some size. He brings a shot block mentality. He brings some prowess on the penalty kill, and I think that was actually quite a shrewd move by Cheveldayoff that hasn't gotten the credit it deserves. So I'm not sure if he is true top four without Doughty. He's not going to play with anyone of that caliber in Winnipeg. There's no chance of that, but he will be, I think, at the very least, a very capable third pairing defense in there. So I think that's a bit of an underrated move. But as for targets, other than Weegar or Hammonic, I don't see anyone else now.
Okay. And Peter, let's go over to you here. Let's talk about so what does this have to do with the Maple Leafs? Well, we're about to find out. So Kyle Dubas has basically come out and said, we need to play harder. Ever since losing to the Columbus Blue Jackets, he didn't feel like that they were tough enough to play against. So what do they do this offseason? They go out and get Wayne Simmons. They go out and sign Zach Bogosian. They bring TJ Brody in. Do you feel like that the Leafs have done enough to address Kyle Dubas's concern, in your opinion?
I think they did a fantastic job addressing that, but I don't think that they're going to be done with that because they think they still got to move some pieces around. They got a lot of depth right now, and that's going to be a really good thing with some of the free agent signings over from Europe and basically what they have right now. So you have a stockpile of depth forwards in Wayne Simmons, Joey Anderson's going to battle, and some of the roster players that we had last year. We re-signed Spezza. There's also Igor Korshkov who could battle for a spot. So there's a lot of depth throughout the whole entire lineup that, Dubas, as you mentioned, he wanted to make sure or prioritize being tougher to play against and getting Simmons, getting even a guy like Zach Bogosian. I think that was a really underrated move, considering the impact that he had with the Tampa Bay Lightning and the fact that he kind of rejuvenated his game playing alongside with Victor Hedman at times, moving up and down the lineup. So I think that it's a great start, but there's still some things that could be tweaked around because there's a major logjam right now. But I think they did an overall good job of trying to address that, toughness mentality, being harder to play against, but still staying true to the fact that they still want to be a skilled team. And I guess Dubas took note with the Tampa Bay Lightning because, they're the Stanley Cup champs right now.
Do you feel as though, all right, I guess the question I want to ask you, Peter, is what do you think is the next step? I know we talked about the toughness factor, but what else do the Leafs have to do, in your opinion, to take that next step to be able to finally win a playoff series?
I think, I've said this for the past 3 years. I said this to the loss against Washington, the loss against Boston 2 times, but if this loss against the Columbus Blue Jackets on their home soil because of the bubble situation, if that didn't kind of serve as kind of a wake-up call for, not even just the depth players to step up, but like for not necessarily Austin Matthews, but even a player like Mitch Marner, who was kind of like invisible during the playing round, he needs to step it up. William Nylander needs to step it up. John Tavares kind of looked, on and off. I know he dealt with his own injury this year, but this is a whole group effort that if they could all come together right now and feel like, you know what, we made the playoffs 4 years in a row. We've lost 4 years in a row. We're probably sick and tired of that. We want to try and take the next step forward, and that should be the mindset. It's all just for them. It's just trying to overcome those obstacles and try and push forward right now.
Absolutely. So let's turn our attention to Jim, and I know we could probably talk about the Oilers for days here, but couple interesting situations I want to get your take on here. And the first one, and I definitely didn't expect this. I'm not sure about anybody else, but Jesse Puljujärvi is back. Did you see this coming, and what do you think that he can give the Oilers this time around?
Yeah, I guess I could say I saw this coming only because they talked about it so much for a couple weeks before they finally pulled the trigger on it. But we'd have been hearing a lot that he was coming, right? And then it wasn't working out, and then the agent wasn't getting along with the team and whatever. But with new management and a new coach, and basically a fresh start. And you got to remember, he's 2 years older now, almost 2 years older now. So he's had a chance to sort of go to another league, really sort of light it on fire, mature a little bit. And he wants to play in the NHL. So he's got to realize at this point, the way to do that is to play with the Oilers. So yeah, I think the roads led to him coming back. I'm super impressed with the deal though. 2 years at one point, what is it? 1.75, like really quite inexpensive, and a 2-year deal is going to give him a lot of opportunity to see what he really is. I have a feeling that he's going to surprise people pleasantly. I think a lot of people have written him off at this point because he hasn't proven in the NHL that he can do it. He's had success somewhere else, and maybe he's got his swagger back, and maybe he comes in and finds the right chemistry with somebody. I'm wondering if in free agency the Oilers just built their third line and he's on it. So he could do well. And if he does, it's an extremely inexpensive contract for a guy who could produce. We don't have a clue what he's going to produce. We don't know if he's going to get 10 goals or going to get 20. He could even get 30. You don't know because he's never done it. But he had such high pedigree coming out of the draft. He's yet to realize it. So I think it's an incredibly cool set. For me, it's kind of like they grabbed a free agent, but did it at a low risk kind of, we'll see what happens. And Oilers did a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. They did. And that leads to my next question. Two kind of key players that they were also able to bring in, Kyle Terrace and Tyson Berry. Just where do you see them fitting on the Oilers roster?
Well, Terrace, I think, is their third line center. I think that was why they went and got him. They wanted to get a third line center. That was on Holland's to-do list. My only concern with Kyle Terrace, I guess there's two. There's one is that we don't really know what kind of a penalty killer he is. And the Oilers had one of the best penalty kills in the league last year. So they lose something, and Riley Sheahan's probably leaving, and Terrace may or may not be an excellent penalty killer. That said, his year in Nashville was just off. I don't know exactly what happened there. I'm not sure that anybody really knows what happened there, but he's a much better player than he played in Nashville. So I have a feeling his offensive production could really trump the lack of maybe penalty kill or defensive production, but he's a right shot center. He's going to play third line center there. I think he's a really good fit. He's a really low risk at 1.6 or whatever it was that they got him for. He has the potential to really kind of explode. I don't know if he's going to get you 50, 60 points. Probably not. And not in the role that he's going to be playing for the Oilers, but he could jump up if there's an injury. He could be moved around. He wants to prove that Nashville was a one-off and that he was what he was in Ottawa is more what the player they can expect to see in Edmonton. So I think that was a really good low-risk signing. As for, their other Tyler Ennis was a pickup they got for $1 million, and they kind of know what he is. So that was a really low risk one too.
Yeah. Tyson Berry, what do you think there?
Tyson Berry, it's hard to argue with that contract, right? Like 3.75 on a 1-year deal. He's going to have a really good show me opportunity. And again, like Terrace, I think he wants to prove that Toronto was just sort of an anomaly. And if you look at his numbers, and Peter can probably speak to this, he got a lot of bad press in Toronto, but he had two almost completely different seasons. He had the season under Mike Babcock and then the season under Sheldon Keefe. And the season under Sheldon Keefe was much better, way better. So, and he's a guy that you remember in Colorado was like a 50-point player multiple times. So I have a feeling that he's going to explode offensively running the power play here. That could be really good. I don't know if this is ever going to go any farther than 1 year. The Oilers are going to have a lot of money coming off the books, so there may be some opportunity to bring him in longer than that. I don't think they're worried about that yet right now. I think they're thinking, you know what, let's just see how this goes. Cheap contract. And the Oscar Cliffbaum situation is really what facilitated all of this, right? Striking out on Jacob Markstrom allowed them to get Tyson Berry, and then the need to have somebody for Clefbaum, because I think they're under the impression he's not going to be available for most, if not all, of next season. So they needed somebody, right? And he's going to immediately come in there, shoots a different side, but he's going to take over that power play. And when you got McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Berry all in your power play, it was already the best power play in the league last year. I can't see how that's going to change.
Quick side question for Peter. Let's talk about Tyson Berry in Toronto.
Yeah.
Why did that not work out in your mind?
I mean, I guess it was mainly because of like Babcock. I mean, there was what, like Jim said, it was a tale of two Tyson Berrys. One where, Tyson Berry was playing on the third line multiple games before his firing, and then Sheldon Keefe found, his true potential in a puck moving right-handed shot and sort of tried to bump him up into the top four, even top pairing role. The thing is, his offense took off under Sheldon Keefe. I guess he found his newfound confidence with him, but the factor that still remained is Tyson Berry was still kind of an issue in his own end defensively, because we know how great of a puck mover he was. It's just his decision making with the puck, in positioning, trying to read on a 2-on-1 kind of situation. It just didn't quite work out. And with the defense situation in Toronto, what it's been like the past few years, if there's someone, you hate to find a scapegoat, but when you see kind of like Barry make those mistakes, kind of like Jake Garner made those mistakes and other defensemen in the past, like Nikita Zaitsev, it's hard to try and get your confidence back and get going. And I think that, defensive issues aside, Tyson Berry could try and prove everybody wrong by playing on the top power play alongside McDavid and Draisaitl. So he has an opportunity. Wish him nothing but the best, but I think that's the reason why you saw two different Berries.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they know that he's not got the best reputation as a defensive defenseman. They're aware of it. I have a feeling they're going to shelter some of that as much as they possibly can. Not that Edmonton's got the best blue line in the NHL. They certainly don't. But I think they're going to probably try to shelter that as much as they can. I think the other thing that he might have going for him here is that the contract is so much lower that when you have that and you're not said, okay, well, you're making X amount of dollars, you have to be good all the time in both ends. Some of that pressure's off of him now, right? So he can go out and do what he needs to do and be the Tyson Berry that people know that he is. And maybe, I mean, Edmonton fans are hard on people too. It's like a Toronto, Montreal, all these cities.
Yeah.
But they might cut him a little slack just because of the fact that contract is so team friendly that they're like, well, hey, we're only paying him this, right? So we can excuse a couple of those gaffes. If there's a million of them, then that's an issue. But I think between sheltering him and knowing that he's underpaid for what he should be, they might cut him a little slack.
And it was just a shade. His new contract is just a shade over what he was technically making because Colorado retained half of his salary. So $2.5 million, just a little bit over. Still good value.
Yeah,
absolutely. Good stuff, guys. So a couple more here. Let's turn our attention to Devin and the Detroit Red Wings. And so a couple, the big question I've got, just seeing what, Steve Yzerman has been able to do so far. I mean, I don't think he's done, but, Vladimir Nemestikov is in. Mark Stahl is in. Troy Stetcher is in. Thomas Greiss is in. Justin Abdelkader bought out. Lots of changes. How much has Detroit improved early in this offseason in your mind?
So, as you kind of just illustrated, they've overturned over a quarter of the roster in the last week, which is kind of nuts when you think about it, especially over the last few years where it seems like they kind of just kept retaining their people and not being willing to bring in new guys. So this is kind of a breath of fresh air for Red Wings fans and the team in general. I don't think they're a playoff team. I don't think they necessarily plan on being a playoff team, but I think that they are a better team. We're not looking at a 17-win team here. I think we're looking at a 25, maybe a 30-win team. And the plan is, I mean, all these guys that they brought in, they're on 1 year or 2 years. I think the plan is 100% to flip most of them at the deadline, retain some of them, potentially to expose them to Seattle, or even to potentially see if there's a long-term fit. I look at a guy like Troy Stetcher in particular as a guy that could be a long-term fit with the team. I actually really like that signing. And then Nemesnikov, I thought that was a really savvy signing. Yzerman was the GM in Tampa Bay when they drafted him. So he's definitely got some familiarity with him. His uncle is Slava Kozlov, who played with the Red Wings back in the day. So there's a lot of cool, lines with this that it's exciting. It's an exciting time in Detroit. Obviously, like I said, they're not going to be a playoff team, but business is buzzing, and it's fun to be excited again.
Yeah, and I think a big reason I think Red Wings fans should be excited is, although they got the number 4 pick in the draft, I mean, you missed out on Alexis Lafreniere, but Lucas Raymond, I tell you what, doesn't he just jump to the top of the prospect pool there for you guys?
100%. No doubt in my mind, he's now the top prospect in the pool. He was my guy that I wanted them to get. I jumped off of my couch when they announced the pick. It's not just what he does on his own, it's his fit long-term, given the pieces they already have. Yeah. I see him and Philip Zadina playing together for 10 years and creating some highlights together, just like Henrik Zetterberg and Pavel Datsyuk used to do together.
Good comparison.
Yes, I'm so excited for Lucas Raymond. I can't praise that pick enough.
He was my 3rd best player available on my entire list, and I know there were rumors going around. It could have been Marco Rossi, could have been Cole Perfetti, it could have been Jamie Drysdale. Great pick by Detroit. And that's why Yzerman gets paid the bucks that he does, because he saw through all that, saw the talent that was there, and Zadina and him, and you hope that some of the others like Veleno kind of step up when the time is right. I mean, you start to see that there's a plan. There's a long way to go.
Yeah, for sure.
Trade deadline, you can get some pieces. You're starting to see it come together, and I think Red Wings fans finally are starting to get that excitement that you're talking about. So,
absolutely.
Can I chime in there for a second?
Yeah.
I know they were disappointed that they fell in the draft, but if there was one draft to fall in, this was the one, because to get a player like Raymond at 4th, he could have in a lot of other draft years he's going number 1 or 2. So if you're going to fall, this was the draft to fall in. And if you were in the top 10 or even in the top 15 of this draft, you were laughing going away. Like the Jets landing Perfetti at 10th. That's that's unbelievable to me.
Absolutely.
Like, I knew they were going to get a good player at 10th, and they were in a no-lose situation. But for a draft to be that deep, if you're going to fall, this was the year to fall in. And there's a lot of good happening in Detroit with Raymond. That's for sure.
Definitely. Go ahead.
As much as I'm happy they picked Raymond over Perfetti, I am still shocked that he fell all the way to 10. Yeah. I thought for sure he'd be just outside the top 5, if not in the top 5.
I didn't even include him in any of my draft coverage of who the Jets might take at 10th, because I never thought for a second he'd be available.
Absolutely.
Size still matters. Rossi and Perfetti are both a little bit undersized, and I actually wrote a piece at the Hockey Writers, the do not draft list, and I actually put Perfetti and Rossi as do not draft in comparison, like don't pick them in the top 5, because I literally thought that they had some questions, size being one of them, and they ended up going, later on kind of in an area that I thought that they would, and it's going to turn out to be a steal for both teams. So
I give a quick tidbit on Rossi.
Yeah.
A lot of people are concerned about his size because, I mean, that's just, the old adage that, teams are kind of afraid of undersized players or players that may not be prototypical size. Quentin Byfield, who's about 6'5", matched up with Marco Rossi. It was last year, and Rossi was shutting him down so much, both at the dot and just in terms of their position on the ice, that they had to move Byfield to the wing just to make sure that he got anything done and he wasn't a non-factor.
Yeah.
So for people that are looking at Rossi and saying, well, he's smaller, well, Byfield is one of the larger prospects you're going to see at his position, and he was completely erased by Rossi.
Rossi's strong. Yep.
He is.
I don't know if anybody saw the tweet about him posting a picture of him working out, and he is he's built for a guy 5'9".
Yeah.
There's no concern about his size at all.
He's got Martin St. Louis quads.
Yeah.
Frank Vatrano is a very similar, very small, but also 210 pounds. These smaller guys are realizing, hey, we've got to be really fast or really strong or some combination of the two to make it in today's game, and Rossi is absolutely stepping up to the plate in that regard.
And being undersized hasn't worked against players like Alex DeBrincat or Brad Marchand. So I'd say that size isn't everything.
So what I think you guys are saying is Rossi falling to Minnesota was pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
Have to get
Good
at
for
least
Minnesota,
one
though.
There you go. Exactly. So 5 minutes after 9 o'clock here, just wanted to chime in. This is the Hockey Writers Live. This is episode number 3. Your host, Mark Scheig. We're going to kind of wrapping it up here a little bit in the next few minutes, but we have our free agency team here, Declan, Schroeder, Peter Baracchini, and Jim Parsons, Brandon Share-Cohen, and Devin Little have joined us here for the last hour plus, just talking about free agency, the offseason, recapping the teams they cover and what might be coming. We only have a couple teams to go. So Brandon, we're going to go back to you here. So another team that you do like to pay attention to is the Boston Bruins. And 2 questions for you about them. First off, real shrewd signing of Craig Smith. I think he's a perfect fit on that team. So I just want to get your thoughts on him. And then how concerned should Bruins fans be about the news of the surgeries with Pasternak and Marchand?
So on Craig Smith, I think that's far and away the best signing we've seen so far in free agency, and that may be a little biased, but I mean, I haven't shied away from saying, hey, this signing's not a good one, or I'm questioning the signing, or if I think it's a great signing, I'll say it. I have no reason to be biased one way or another about a deal, right? Craig Smith is a great player. They signed him to exactly the term you would want in 3 years for a guy who's already 31. He's going to immediately make the Bruins a better team, which might be scary for some fans who are thinking, well, the Bruins were the President Trophy winners last year. Yes, they're another year older, but still they're adding a guy who's a veteran. He's a leader. 3 years really doesn't handcuff them for anything past their current window. The salary cap was at $3.1 million per year. You couldn't get much better than that. And then on the flip side, you're losing a guy like Tori Krug. Like you said, both Pasternak and Marchand are going to be injured to start the season. We don't know anything about Cherry yet. They're still restricted free agents in Jake DeBrusk, Matt Grzelcyk. There's a lot of questions left for this team that have to be answered. We're still only, less than a week into free agency. So I think a lot of people are really saying they're the losers of free agency. And it's fair to say that they should have been a little more involved in certain things, or I guess maybe tried to pull the trigger or get something done like a Nate Schmidt deal, considering what we've seen unfold already. But again, young offseason, a lot of really talented players left. You can't have it both ways and say there's a lot of really great talent left, and also the Bruins have lost free agency because they haven't made a big signing yet other than Craig Smith. So I think we have to see really what goes on with that. And I mean, like you said, the injuries are definitely going to hurt them. But I think they'd be in agreement with this as well. The team, they'd much rather see these players be out and missing the first few weeks of the season at the most, as opposed to missing the last few weeks of the season. Right? You don't want them to miss the playoffs.
Exactly right. Good stuff. And I'm going to wrap up the teams here with the team that I covered, and the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they needed to address the center position in the worst possible way. And if they were going to trade Josh Anderson, they had to get a center back, and they were able to do that in getting Max Domi. What I think is going to be interesting, I think you give the trade an A because they need to get center depth. It's just now a matter of the actual fit. He's going to go in as the number 2 center, and it'll be really interesting to see because he's now going to be behind Pierre-Luc Dubois. They brought Mikko Koivu in, so now all of a sudden they have a 1-2-3 down the middle, whereas a lot of fans out there are thinking, oh, they need a top line, preferably a left winger to be able to come in. They were 27th in goals last year. There's a good chance they're done, depending upon, we say that there's all this cap space. That might not necessarily be true, because if Pierre-Luc Dubois is looking for a long-term contract, he might get a big number. I mean, right now, Brandon Dubinsky's contract is still on the books, so there's still around $13 million available. Let's say you give Dubois $6-7 million. Vladislav Gavrikov might get $3 to $4 million. That $13 million might be actually around $3 or $4 million right now. So that could explain why they haven't gotten anybody yet. But the real concern for the Blue Jackets, though, is why is Pierre-Luc Dubois not signed yet? We really don't know what's going on. We know the sides have been talking for the last year, but it's been kind of quiet, which tells me that Dubois is somebody who might want a long-term deal now. I mean, we're in COVID, so you kind of want a situation where you have term and you have security. The Blue Jackets are probably looking to go for a bridge deal because Dubois doesn't have arbitration rights. So, it's just that standard negotiating. The Blue Jackets have been kind of known to be a hard team in that sense. So that has to be priority number one right now. They have to get him signed. So if the longer this goes, they might miss out on some of these free agents. And I think the way that we have to grade the offseason, we have to wait to see once Dubois gets in, once Gavrikov gets in, let's see what they do after that, because then they'll know the budget that they have, and we'll see if they pursue any possible trades. I think they're going to look at Tampa. They're going to look at Dallas. They're going to look at cap-strapped teams because they feel like they're going to have some flexibility out of it. And I think they're not done yet. It's going to take a little bit of patience for them. I think they're in a really good spot. I think that addressing the center depth is going to allow Cam Atkinson. It's going to allow Oliver Bjorkstrand. It's going to allow Gus Nyquist to be able to enjoy good years because they have players more in their natural spots now. Where Boone Jenner played center most of the season, he could still be a center, but they're going to look to put him back on the wing. So I just think the positioning on the roster was really addressed. So that's a good thing, but I don't think they're done. There's still a lot more to come with that team, and they're going to be very interesting to watch because they have a lot of cap space remaining. So see where that all goes. So got one last question for everybody here before we call this a night, and we will go ahead and start with Brandon on this one. So if there is a team or teams out there right now that you would call a winner thus far in free agency, who would it be and why?
I'm torn between saying both Montreal and Colorado as my winners. Montreal, whether you agree with what they've done or not, they've definitely done what they wanted to do this offseason. Similar to like Peter's mentioned, the Maple Leafs have done what they've wanted to do. So if you can accomplish those goals and on paper you look better than you were, before free agency started, before the draft took place, I think I could call you a winner in that regard. And for Colorado, I mean, they got Brandon Saad. They've taken care of their own player signings with Burakovsky, Nichushkin. They've done what you expect them to do and then some, I think. So Colorado is already a dangerous team, and now the Avalanche are even more dangerous.
That's scary to think about. I mean, to have a team that could win the Stanley Cup in Colorado, and you have to think that they're one of the 3 or 4 best prospect teams right now, too, with who's on their way. I mean, I can't think of a better situation out there than Colorado right now.
Yeah.
Seems pretty obvious. But Declan, who do you got?
I'm going to agree with Brandon and say the Montreal Canadiens. I think the deal for Allen today is a really shrewd one. With the truncated NHL season, there are going to be fewer off games, and you're not going to see goalies playing 60, 70 games. Nobody's going to be Connor Hellebuck this season, not even Connor Hellebuck. So to get a viable backup goaltender that can, do more than just kind of bail water out of the boat, so to speak, was a really good move. They've got, I know the Anderson signing's a risk. They're paying him for what they hope he's going to be, not for what he is right now, because I don't think I can ever remember somebody getting a nearly $6 million contract after a one goal season, but we'll see how that works out. But they added Edmondson as well, and they got Gallagher re-signed today. So I'd say the Canadiens have taken a huge step towards competitiveness in the last 10 days.
Absolutely. Devin, what do you have to say about the biggest winner in your mind so far?
So I'm going to quickly touch on 2 teams here. I got to mention Buffalo. No one saw them getting Taylor Hall, and I think that will definitely quiet some rumblings about Jack Eichel being upset. I think you put Jack Eichel alongside Taylor Hall, you're going to see some crazy stuff. We'll see if it works out. Obviously, it was a 1-year deal, but definitely some newsworthy action that they needed. And the other team I look at is New Jersey, actually. Getting Ryan Murray for a 5th round pick, I would have done that. Johnson from the Maple Leafs, I thought that was a real good pickup. And then Corey Crawford. I mean, I think that obviously with the young pieces they have with Heischer and Hughes, then to add those 3, they got a good thing going there. I think it's just a matter of time that they're going to be legitimate playoff and even just legitimate contenders in the East.
Yeah, very good call out in New Jersey. He was actually going to be one. They're going to be one of the teams that I mentioned on mine. So that's, yeah. I mean, they're not done yet. They have a ton of cap space, like 18 million in cap space, and they don't have a full roster yet. So they can bargain shop, and I'll be really curious
100%.
to see what they do. Is they have the capacity to maybe take on a bad contract, but really get something nice out of it. They have a lot of options. So
absolutely, and they just got Holtz too in the draft, or not Holtz. They didn't get Holtz.
Yeah, Holtz.
Yeah.
It was Holtz.
Okay, yes,
Holtz and Mercer and Shakir.
Yeah, they got a haul is what they got.
Dawson Mercer's a player too. I know Holtz is getting all the attention, but Dawson Mercer draft year, he made Team Canada. There are a lot of players that made Team Canada, but it's a heck of a way to start your draft year to get on that team and to be able to win a gold medal. He played on the fourth line, but that's because of how talented he is. They didn't really need his offense at that point. They just needed his well-rounded all game. New Jersey's going to be pretty scary in a couple of years here, assuming they stay on the right path. So, Peter, what do you have to say in terms of your biggest winner?
Well, Maple Leafs aside, I really do like what Vancouver did during the free agency. I mean, they lost Chris Tanev, they lost Jacob Markstrom, but they did a really good job in replacing those pieces. They gave up a third round for Nate Schmidt, who could possibly line up alongside Quinn Hughes. That seems like a really interesting pairing right then and there. And Braden Holtby just secures the net. I really thought that Thatcher Demko really solidified his spot as a starter, but getting Brayton Holtby at the term that he has and his pedigree as a Stanley Cup champ, I think it reassures him in the crease. And I just going on what Brandon said about Craig Smith, I really loved him, and I thought of him as a major signing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But 330 points in 660 games, and he's had multiple 20-goal seasons. So I really think that despite losing Tori Krug, still don't know what's going on with Chara, I think they really got a really great offensive player in Craig Smith that could still help out with their scoring depth.
Yep. Good stuff there. And Jim, what do you say in terms of who's been the biggest winner in your mind?
Well, I had most of the teams that have been mentioned already on my list. I had Buffalo for Taylor Hall. I had Montreal for just the amount of stuff that they did to improve their team. And to go with the players that they already had, I think that's a really good mix. I thought Colorado did really well with the Graves and Brandon Side trade. I'll go with the obvious one. So just to be different, Vegas, right? Because of the fact that they got the biggest free agent in the market. And it's not like they overpaid. They paid a lot, but this would in any other year not have been an overpayment. But in this year, because of the contracts that were given out, it seems maybe like a slight overpayment. But you got to remember, this guy's an elite defenseman. Yeah, it's a 7-year deal. He's going to be elite for at least 3 more years. Right. So he's an excellent player. They did have to give up Nate Schmidt to do it, but he still upgrades their team. They did have to give up Paul Stastny, but I think they got some guys that can come up in that spot and play excellent roles. And the other thing about that, even just Pietrangelo aside, Vegas just proved no matter what you have or how much cap space you don't think you have, it doesn't matter. You can make it work, right? Now, Vegas is different in that they're the premier destination in the NHL right now. Everybody seems to want to go there. So they'll have the ability. I do worry about them long-term though. You know, because when you have an identity like you had when you came into the league, and now it's shifting, you're no longer the little underdogs, the cast-offs that everybody wanted to, whatever. Now you're the team that everybody wants to go to. You're grabbing all the big, shiny new toys. I don't know if that's sustainable long-term. I'm concerned about that, but they do have the non-tax in Nevada, and they have all those other things going for them. But it's hard to ignore them. When they've added Alex Pietrangelo, and they're that good a team, they're immediately contenders. So I don't know how you can say they weren't a winner here, even if, you know, it's a little iffy here, short-term, long-term. I don't know how it's going to turn out for them because it sounds like they're upsetting a few people, ruffling some feathers in Las Vegas. But yeah, when you add Pietrangelo, how can you be a loser, right?
Exactly. I mean, you can add an elite level defender like that. I mean, they're out to win cups, so it's definitely good all the way around. I actually had 4 teams on my list. A couple of them were mentioned. Buffalo was on my list, but I'll say outside of Taylor Hall, I mean, we know that the Hall was the big signing, but think about the perception of the Buffalo Sabres. They've gone 9 years without winning, actually getting to the playoffs just at all. So we thought that Taylor Hall was going to pick somewhere in which, hey, he's going to win. And he ended up picking a team that hasn't been in the playoffs in 9 years. How big of a victory is that good? How good does it have to feel for fans of that team that they can land somebody like that? Because they do have the star power there. think about that power play for a second. Jack Eichel, Taylor Hall, Victor Olofsson, Sam Reinhart, and Rasmus Dahlin. That's just filthy all the way around. And to be able to add a player like Hall, I think that Buffalo overall, just the perception of them, the fans are just so restless right now. They desperately want a winner. I mean, to think they drafted Jack Eichel number 2, and they haven't been to the playoffs yet with him. They want something. And I think Taylor Hall here just gives them a little bit of a glimmer of hope, but they're still in a wait and see because they want to make sure that the chemistry is there. I have Montreal on my list too. I actually think they're going to be a really good team this year. I actually have them in the top 3 in the Atlantic just because of some of the moves that they made. That's not an easy out anymore, especially adding Josh Anderson. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people that haven't paid attention to him. But I'll give you 2 teams that haven't been brought up yet. The New York Rangers, they landed the number 1 pick. So him, Artemi Panarin, that's just filthy if they end up on the same line, if Lafreniere end up going to center. But just the speed of the rebuild is there. And to be able to actually get him in the fold, it's just ridiculous in a good way. But I'll give you a team that I think is a winner that is going completely under the radar, and it's the Florida Panthers. Let me tell you why. Because first-time GM in Bill Zito, plucked him from Columbus, brought in Patrick Hornquist, brought in Alexander Wenberg, brought in Marcus Nunavera, and there's still going to be some things I think they're going to look at here. But they wanted to get a little bit tougher, and they wanted to address their defense. And I think that these aren't kind of the flashy signings that a lot of fans we like to look at, but they're effective. And I think that Zito's done a really nice job of just making good decisions so far, and then being able to draft Anton Lundell, who's a personal favorite of mine, and from the draft, for him to be able to learn behind Alexander Barkov. A good start by them. So in my book, that's a win. But the thing that I'm going to end with the Panthers, Barkov's 2 years away from UFA. I just wonder if they're going to start to make a decision on him to see, do they want to keep him? Do they feel like that they could re-sign him to a long-term deal, or do they feel that they might be able to get the best value for him? I just kind of wonder what the future plans are for him. And I think that's going to be the first major test for the Panthers, but they are off to a very good start, in my opinion, in free agency. So guys, this has been wonderful. I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you, Declan, Peter, Devin, Brandon, and Jim. They're our free agency team, and they just done so much work, especially in the last week or two, and really all year round for that matter, in our news department. Just they're cranking, as stuff comes out, they're just cranking out everything. They really just do amazing work for us. And just wanted to thank you for the time tonight. Thank you for joining us here on episode 3 of the Hockey Writers Live, guys.
Yep. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks. Hope we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. We're going to end on a fun note, as we like to kind of do that around here. I'm going to ask you guys just one kind of completely off the wall question, just to, for fun. So I saw the other day, and I don't know if this is a thing that's in Canada or not. I know I haven't seen it here in the United States, but there is a Kit Kat bar that is Cinnamon Toast Crunch flavored.
Oh.
My question for you guys is yes or no, would you eat that?
Yep.
Brandon says yes.
I haven't had Cinnamon Toast Crunch in a while, but that sounds really delicious, so I'm going to say yes.
We have 2 for yes.
It's Kit Kat and it's cinnamon. I feel like you can't lose there if you like either of the two.
I don't
if you
feel like
both.
Yeah, you can't lose there.
It's a great combo.
I want to get my hands on it now.
I'll try and hook you up.
I'm a really, really big baker. I like to spend a lot of time in the kitchen, but just do chocolate and cinnamon really go together? In my mind, not really, but I mean, it's a chocolate bar, so how bad could it be? And Kit Kat's one of the elite. They have a lot of good different flavors. So yeah, I'd give it a go. And I'm sure I wouldn't hate it.
I feel like we could have our own episode rating candy or any sort of food for that matter.
Shove some peanut butter in there. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
I've got Cinnamon Toast Crunch coffee creamer, so I'm all in.
I have that too. That stuff is amazing, Devin. I'm right there
Absolutely.
with you. don't have to add anything to it. Just pop it in the cup, pour your coffee in, you're good to go.
Absolutely.
Or you can just drink it without the coffee.
Exactly. Well, guys, seriously, thank you very much for the time tonight. And fans, look for these guys out on Twitter, out on the Hockey Writers. As I said, they do some of the best work. So thanks, guys. We really appreciate the time.
Thanks for having us.
Have a good
Thanks,
night.
Mark.
Thanks,
Yep.
guys.
And next week, episode 4 is going to come back. I think Josh is going to be back. We might have a special guest or two. So 8 p.m. next Wednesday night. Make sure that you hit that like button on Facebook. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube. And we will be back next week at the same time for more of the Hockey Writers Live.